Are you sometimes stuck in The Sims, not sure what to do next, overwhelmed by all the possibilities? Well, I've created a 4-step method called the CARE method to help you get back into the game and feel excited to play your storylines again, whether or not you're starting a new save file or you're 10 generations in. The C in the CARE method stands for characterize, and I would say it's arguably probably one of the most important letters or steps in this method. It's definitely my favorite one. By definition, characterize means to describe the character or quality of something. And so in this case, of course, of our Sims. You could even characterize a home though, even, or a save file. So you could assign a theme to it, for example, and that would also characterize that. And I think you can do this whether or not you're a builder or a game player. I mainly am making this for game players, so that's my area of expertise per se. But I think characterize is something that you can do virtually with anything you're doing in a live sim game. It can really help bring meaning to your gameplay. I think arguably of all these steps, it's the most important one. So when you characterize your sim, you are giving meaning to them. You're giving purpose to their story. And in essence, you're creating a sim that you care about, that you can feel connected to. One part of that is giving them an origin story from which then their objective comes. So they have a past, they've experienced some things, and that's built them into the person they are today. Like your sim doesn't just exist poof in CAS. I mean, theoretically they do, but think of who your sim was before they were in CAS. What baggage are they bringing? Maybe what benefits, what one-ups do they have in their back pocket? And why, like, what influenced them to be who they are and to want what they want? Why do they have the aspiration you chose? Why do they have the traits that you selected? And another way you can characterize your sim is to define them and their character, their personality, by how they interact with others. Are they more like Don Lothario, womanizer? That gives us, insight on the type of person he is, for example. Or are they like Miss Crumplebottom, a bit more, distanced and judgmental? That really brings interest to your sim. And so think about that. Like, I often, in the beginning, would always just create a sim out of thin air, put them in a save file, and then start playing with them. Obviously, they can build relationships in the town or the world that they live in, but why not come up with some relationships already to help push your story, to help you come up with who your sim is based on who they have in their direct vicinity. So maybe it's a parent. So I created, for example, the mom of Ida Muniz. I made sure that she was in a nearby world so that Ida could hang out with her, could touch base with her, tell her how life was going. So she had basically moved to Evergreen Harbor. She was having a new start, new beginning, but I didn't want her to lose. I wanted her to have some sort of connection to her family still. And so I created her mom, and I also created her dad and some grandparents and stuff like that with a mod. But needless to say, it really helped, I feel, make her real, because all of a sudden she had a family. She had, also I created a backstory for her and all that stuff. But I feel the relationships that a sim has, it shows, how they behave with them, if they're meany, if they're nice, if they're generous. That also defines a bit who they are, and it can make you feel more connected to them because it just gives them that depth. I'm also a big proponent of character over plot. I think if you have a really interesting sim, one that is a believable sim, right? You don't just slap on 3 traits and an aspiration and call it a day. I think if you create a sim that has some sort of meaning behind them, like some sort of really important goal that they're going for, maybe there's some stakes, there's something on the line, then that is a sim that I think can keep your story really interesting for a while. Like your gameplay, I think if you don't have to put too much time into it, right? Because we don't want to procrastinate. We want to actually play the game, right? But I think if you put some thought into your sim and who they are and why they want something, like what are their motivations again, what's their backstory, how does that influence things, then I think you have your plot already. Like, I know a lot of simmers like to start with storyline and then come up with the characters that fill that, and that's fine. I personally prefer to come up with my character first, and then from who they are, I come up with a storyline that fits them. Or you could even have a storyline, like, I don't know, rags to riches, and depending on the type of character your sim is, determines how they are going to engage in that theme, right? If they're going to be a kleptomaniac and steal and be a criminal, or if they're going to, keep it legal, so to say. I feel like a sim that has some sort of purpose, that has an intrinsic goal, gives your gameplay direction. So your decisions that you'll make, they will come naturally from who your character is. So that's, again, a big struggle that we have is not knowing what to do next. We're overwhelmed with all the possibilities. Well, if we just go off of what our character would do, we ask ourselves, what would Keith do? What would Ida do? Whatever name your sim is. they have a certain personality and they will, like Keith and Ida, two Sims that are currently my favorites in my current households, they would react very differently to maybe the same goal. Like they would reach that goal differently, and they even have different goals. So I might not even like I'm pursuing building a ranch with Keith, and with Ida having her own hair salon. So that already rules out a bunch of other possibilities, right? So it's really helpful if you have a sim that feels real, that feels like they actually have something that they're striving for, and that can help direct your gameplay. So decisions you'll make moving forward will feel organic and natural, and you don't have to think too much about it because you already have a sim that is basically the blueprint for everything that comes next. And so the story will naturally flow. Now, of course, I say blueprint, I say, the sim determines basically how the story will go. It can change, of course. That's the point. When you press play, you don't really know how the cards will fall. The game still throws some stuff at you, and, you're playing a bit of improv with the game. So you still have that, natural bit of chaos that can come into the role and maybe ruin your sim's plans, change them completely and entirely, and you can adapt, and that's still fun, right? That's part of the game. But I think it helps to have some sort of plan on the outset, and that could just be a sim that has personality, that has a clear goal, and then that's what you can follow when you play the game. I really feel like if you have a character that has no personality, you won't have a connection with them. So no characterization, no connection. So I think if you keep asking yourself why your gameplay is boring, why you're stuck, why you don't know what to do next, look at your character first, look at your sim first. Who are they? Can you even answer that question? Try there first. The reason why characterization is such an important and useful tool in this 4-step method is because it gives your sim purpose. It gives them something to strive for. And essentially, it gives you a reason to feel emotionally attached to their story because they're not, some wooden inanimate puppet anymore. Like Pinocchio, you breathe life into them because now, like a real person, they have, depth, they have multiple layers. So basically, think about why should you care about your sim? Why, what are they pushing for? So create a story behind your sim that gives them some sort of drive and gives them emotions. For example, for Keith Fox, he's a sim I created initially for the belovedsims.com love finder, like dating site I created. And so I was trying to think, okay, who is he? He's not just his traits, right? So I wanted to create I wanted to write a dating profile for him. And so I had to think, okay, what kind of sim is this? Apart from the fact that we know he loves music, outdoors, and he's an adventurous kind of sim, I then used the Enneagram personality types to figure out more about him. So Enneagram is a framework that helps you better understand really yourself as well. I think it's like also kind of like a self-help kind of framework. I use it to give my sims more personality. It's just 9 different personality types, and based on your sim's traits, you can select what would be most likely for that sim. For Keith, I chose the type 7 enthusiast. That's a sim that would love freedom and exploration, but at the same time, they can be impulsive and they don't like to be constrained and constricted in their ways. So, being that Keith is adventurous and an outdoorsy kind of guy, I felt like that hit the nail on the head. And then when I was coming up with his backstory, I thought, he's a musician, or he has like musical skill. He plays the guitar and he likes to sing. So I thought maybe he regrets, because I always like to think of what's a regret and a secret a sim has. He regrets not pursuing his music career. So he had an opportunity when he was younger to go on tour, on a music tour, but he said no because he was hesitant to leave his hometown. Now he would do that at a heartbeat. He has no problem with change and moving. Again, type 7 enthusiast. But back in the day, he was a bit more reserved. And so, yeah, he missed that opportunity and he regrets that. So that's something that it doesn't have to have any meaning at all for my story moving forward, but it's something that I can have in the back of my head. If I'm stuck with my story, I can think, maybe we could check out the music angle again. Maybe we can try to explore that. Maybe he can, it's a regret, so maybe he can change the tables and pursue a career in music. Who knows, right? Yeah, potentially a bands pack. Is people would also simmers keep talking about a bands pack that is going to be released. If that happens, then sure, it'll naturally fall into his storyline for him to explore that again. And so I added that. Also, part of his story is he wants to build a ranch. That was already part of his love profile, his dating profile. But when I went further to create an actual backstory for Keith, I thought, you know what? Why doesn't he? Because I think he's the kind of guy he likes to get hands-on. So I found a really cool abandoned cabin on YouTube by Wolf X Streamer, and I downloaded it and I said, you know what, this is a cabin. He's going to renovate it and he's going to build it into his own ranch. So he's going to gradually build it into a ranch, and that's the plan. So he starts off small, kind of like a rags to riches, but ranch style. And so I thought that'd be a fun idea, and it ties into his story because he loves nature, he loves to be outdoors, he loves animals, so why not, build a ranch? And then making it into a cabin, so it's something he's attached to. He paid a pretty penny for it. It was still, of course, not super expensive because it was an abandoned small cabin, but he doesn't have that much money, so he's working as a landscaper. So it was a stretch for him. So it's something he's attached to. It's definitely something that's important to him, and one of his main goals moving forward in my story. And so that propels my storyline. I already know when I'm going into the game already a couple things I could play around with, but that's not all. I also thought that Keith wants to find his tribe. So he has a bit of a rocky history with his parents. They were very technological, very controlling, and he distanced himself from that. And so he wants to find his chosen family. And so moving to Moonwood Mill, he is looking to make new friends and find a group of people that he can feel comfortable with. And maybe they can help him, he can help them. So he's, very outgoing like that. So I think that would be a really fun thing to explore, which I have. This is just really a summary of how I came up with Keith, and really I've been having a ton of fun with him. So I really recommend coming up with little bullet points outside of their traits and their aspirations that make your sim feel more than just 3 traits. And if we do the same for Don Lothario, so we know that he loves to love freely. Okay, that's something that's for sure. And to be honest, can you even off the top of your head say the traits that Don Lothario has? I mean, we know, of course, his lore, his relationships with other Sims, which informs a lot about how we think and about him and who he is and how he would maybe react or act in the game. That gives us a lot of information. Like I said, I think it helps if you create relationships around your sim, have them interact with those Sims, and that helps you get a better idea of who they are. So I have no idea. I probably something with non-committal, I imagine. But apart from that, what else do we know, or could we say about Don to help us understand him better, based on what the Enneagram types are, what they say about the values and vices of each sim? I think Don Lothario would be a type 7 as well, just like Keith, but a very different flavor, I'd say, of the type 7 Enneagram. So he's definitely, so I think where we have Keith's adventurousness and adventurous spirit comes from, or expresses itself in wanting to go out in nature, wanting to try new things, explore different worlds, whereas Dawn likes to explore new women. Okay, so very different expression here. I don't see Don Lothario moving house anytime soon, but he definitely does get around. So that is, so he's definitely impulsive, I would say. Definitely both type 7s, but somewhere different on the spectrum maybe, or it expresses itself differently. He's definitely selfish, I would say. It's hard to say, if I don't know if he's a bad person or not, right? Because it could just be his nature. He just loves women and he doesn't want to hurt them, so he keeps it to himself. But I think at the same time, I think he's putting his wants before the women that he dates. So I think we can safely say he's selfish, which is not a trait in the game. Not something you could assign to him directly, but based on how he's behaving with other women, he's selfish for sure. He's a womanizer, definitely. Again, that comes from how he's reacting or behaving with other people in the game, what we know from his lore. And that's also what we're trying to create here. So when I say characterize, we want to create a little bit of lore about our sim so that we are not just coming straight out of cast without anything. I think that's also very common. People, spend so much time building a save file, building a home, creating their sims in cast, giving them the perfect outfits, and then they're like, okay, what now? So I think if we go one step further, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but just give your sim a little bit of lore, a little bit more than those couple of traits, then that can really bring your story to life, bring your sim to life, first and foremost, and help you make decisions easier in the game. But for Dawn, I say last bit is a question mark. Like I said, already hinted at before. Is he a bad guy or is he a good guy doing bad things? That's something else you can decide when you're in the game, right? From what we know about him already, he could also go on a redemption arc. That's also knowing a bit of his backstory. Maybe he wants to change his ways. Maybe he realizes that he's hurting so many people and he feels bad about it eventually. And so he's like, you know what? I'm going to do differently and I'm going to do better. And so maybe you're going to take down Lothario and you're going to spin it. You're going to be like, you know what? He's not going to be a womanizer anymore. He's not going to be selfish anymore. And he will, still be in a type 7 Enneagram. He won't lose that. But how can he be still, loving freely, but maybe fairly? Maybe he tells the women beforehand or something like that he's dating around. Polyamory is now part of the game since Love Struck. So I'm just saying, that's so maybe a redemption arc you could play. So since we have a little bit of lore from him, we can come up with that. So I think traits alone wouldn't give you that, but knowing that he's a bit of a bad boy, we have now something in the hand where we can spin it into, you know what? Let's just do the direct opposite. Let's make him do better, so to say. And so that's something that can help inspire your gameplay. And so your task here, so I want to give you something to take away to help you, work with that first step of characterization. Give your sim a backstory. You have to know the past to understand their present, which is a quote from Carl Sagan. And the thing is, if you know your sim's past, the easier it'll be to make decisions for them, as I mentioned before. The decisions you make will feel more organic to them, more natural. And I think it'll also make your game feel a little bit less trivial because you're not just skilling up, for example, something just for the sake of skilling up, or you're not just following an aspiration for the sake of following an aspiration. You are doing it because it ties somehow into the story of your sim, whether it's their origin story or the present story that has, developed from their origin story, like a redemption arc, for example. So it really helps create, I feel, just meaningful gameplay. So I think it really helps. Now, we want to make it as easy as possible to create this backstory because I don't want us to spend too much time in this step. We have 4 steps. Characterization, in my opinion, the most important, but we have 4 of them. And the next one that's coming up is, I feel, one that we kind of shy away from sometimes. So I think it's good if we don't spend too much time on this one and we don't procrastinate. So we want to make it as easy as possible to create that backstory because we want to just get in the game, right? We want to actually start playing. We don't want to spend too much time with characterization. So we want to make it as easy as possible. So first things first, keep it simple. You don't have to create this elaborate backstory like 10 pages long about, where they were born, about their parents and, I don't know, 4 levels outside of their circle, who their relationships with. Keep it simple. Just pick a couple of things that you want to define about your sim's backstory and keep it at that. You can always elaborate further later down the line if something pops up in your mind, but you don't need much to get started to really feel like your sim has substance. I find it very helpful to assign an Enneagram personality to your sim, just for the very fact that an Enneagram personality comes with a bunch of insights already out the gate. So it tells you what the motivation would be of that character, what their vices are, and, how they react under stress, how they interact with other people, what are their weak points, their strengths. So you have already nice and neat packaged. All you have to do is pick the Enneagram type. You can pick it based off of traits that you've picked from your sim already, or you can randomize or just pick the Enneagram type that you think sounds the most fun. And you pick that, and already you have really a lot of information. Because in the Enneagram, it actually, I think, goes a little bit into childhood as well. You can find information about that, like why is a type 7 like they are, or why is a type 4 like they are. So it gives you a really good jump start on that backstory. And arguably, it's maybe all you need to really have a sim that feels a bit more real. As you saw, though, 2 type 7s can look very differently. So it helps to customize it a little bit to your story, to your sim, so that it feels more more real and also more personal for you, so that you feel like you're not just taking some cookie cutter personality type, but you're making it a little bit your own, and making it make sense for your sim. And why not bounce off ideas with ChatGPT? So it's something I really like to do to gather more information, for example, about Enneagram personality types. If I give ChatGPT, okay, my sim has these traits, this Enneagram personality type, and knows these people, what would it look like for them moving forward? Like, it's nice to have like ChatGPT as a sparring partner, so to say, where you can bounce ideas off of him. And ChatGPT often comes up with things or connects things in ways I hadn't thought of before. Sometimes I don't even use the ideas, but just seeing them makes me think of new ideas and inspires me. So yeah, I think it's really fun. And you can use my backstory creator. So I created a template for Notion. So Notion is a free note-taking app that you can use. It's a very popular app in the productivity field, and it's gaining traction now for simmers as well. But it's basically, it's a template that helps you create a backstory for your sim. in 3 super easy steps. So it helps you randomize an Enneagram personality type. It has a bunch of tarot cards, so it lets you draw 3 tarot cards, and each of them has a prompt to help you come up with your Sim's childhood, their regret or secret, and whatever current attachment they have. So if it's to a mentor, to another Sim, their career, whatnot. So they help you help inspire your Sim's backstory. And it also includes an AI prompt that you can put into ChatGPT with, the information you rolled. So with the tarot cards and the Enneagram type that you randomized and other information that you have, so that you can have a backstory really within minutes, so that we don't stay stuck on the characterization step too long. Because the point here is that we go through all of the steps. When we now look at the next step, so letter A stands for animate. So I think this is something we Simmers shy away from sometimes. So animate means literally to bring to life. And with this step, I mean literally to press play in live mode. So that's the goal, is to press play in live mode to bring your Sim to life. And I know you're like, oh my God, really? Can we skip this? That could be the step, instead of CARE. But I'm like, no. We need to stop procrastinating. I mean, I know it myself. I took forever until I finally played the Keith save file. Months I was stuck on building the perfect save file for him, but I was like, nah. Eventually I was like, I am not a custom save file maker. I'm not a builder. I'm not a casser. I mean, I have fun with all those 3 things, but main reason I open up The Sims is to actually play in live mode. And I want to make that clear. So I'm not just saying press play in CAS or, because that's also technically playing the game. I mean, pressing play in live mode. And yes, I'm calling it live mode. It's build mode. It's not build mode or building mode. It's build mode. So it's live mode. It's not live mode. So yeah, think about it. We're proud of how many hours we've racked up in the app. So, the EA app tells us, 20,000 hours played, and you're like, oh, so proud. But how many of those hours have you actually played in live mode? Be honest with yourself. How many hours were you in live mode, or how many hours were you in build mode looking for a certain color item for hours? How long were you in CAS giving your Sim a new makeover for the 30th time? Sure, it's fun, it's relaxing. I ain't saying nothing against it. I'm just saying we need to actually press play in live mode and bring our Sim to life. So that's what I'm arguing for here in this step, is animate. We want to make temporal progress. And I couldn't find a better word for this. But basically to make progress in terms of time. So we don't want, in terms of in-game time too, not just, like I said, with the amount of hours you've played, but actual time in-game. So actually experience your Sim story for longer than 5 minutes, where 5 real life minutes, where you then just give up because you feel some form of anxiety. Just give it a chance. A better way of measuring the progress you've made in the game is through Sim years. So not through hours played, but through Sim years. So I personally feel like 100 Sim years is well worth more than 100 hours played, right? Or even 1,000 hours played, depending on what you were doing in those 1,000 hours. Imagine how much history, well, also probably how broken your game would probably be, because there's this new bug going along where, the bigger your save file is, or the older it is, the worse it becomes corrupt. But that's a story for another day. Another way you can actually make progress in your game to bring your Sim to life is actually let them live. Let them actually move through the different life stages. Let them age. So I know it's easier said than done. I personally myself feel very strong FOMO, especially, you get really attached to your founder Sims or to the firstborns. It's really where I turn aging off, and I'm like, nah, let's just sit here in this moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like those Simmers that play on short lifespan, I don't know, it sounds really difficult to me, but at the same time, maybe they've figured it out, because they are playing on short lifespan with aging turned on, and they are moving through these generations. They're actually seeing different groups of Sims, and I'm 2-3 years later still stuck on the same family, and it's just hard. It is hard, I know, but I gotta take my own advice. I really think it helps to let your Sims age, especially if you're a legacy game player. Let the story progress. Though, I mean, you could be playing a super Sim and their story just progresses within their different phases of life. I mean, do you? But I think another way to really measure the progress of your game is not only by how much in-game time you've actually played, how many years have gone by, but also have your Sims aged? Have they passed along? Do we have new generations cropping up? I think that really can make things fresh again. You're playing with different Sims. And I think, yeah, maybe if you're stuck with the same Sim for too long, that can get boring. And so let them age, let go of them, and then maybe that'll help. I don't know. I I've been playing with Eda for the longest and Keith as well, so I gotta take an L for this one. But in general, whether you're letting them age or not, the more you actually play with your sim and experience their story and not just like think up their story for ages, like come up with a bunch of lore ahead of time, the more you actually play it, like play with them, the more time you spend with your sim, I think the more invested you'll become in their story and the more meaningful it'll become as well. And I think one reason we might get I think one reason we sometimes get burned out is we spend so much time thinking ahead of time what our sim could experience. We make plans for them, and then when we play the game, that puts we have that pressure on us. And I think if we just go with the flow and press play and just play the game, then I think it'll just make things a lot easier. I think developing that history with your sim makes everything that comes after feel that much more important and impactful. Everything that will come after really builds off of that history. Like, think of Don Lothario or Bella. I mean, if they had no lore, we wouldn't really care for them that much probably. We wouldn't feel emotionally attached because they wouldn't have a story to them. That's why I think, why not create the same lore for our Sims as well? So like I said before with the characterized. But then I think the lore that we've played with our Sims has even more impact. I imagine like Bella is cool, but imagine you playing Bella and creating like an extended story from already, like building off of that. With history and lore, when creating that for your Sims, I think that's one of the reasons why legacy gameplay is so popular, because growing that history just feels so fulfilling, because you've not only thought of maybe the story when you came up with your founder, but you've developed, like, so much has happened since then that you experienced because you played the game, that it actually a story that developed naturally while you were playing. And yeah, I think that is worth so much and is a reason why, even though I love coming up with story myself, and it's a way to be creative, to think of all the different angles, I think it's more than enough to just think of like a simple backstory, and then from there, actually letting the rest of the story play out in the game. And you can always come back to step one, step C, and revisit the characterization of your sim if things get stale. There's actually a step later, step E, which will handle if you feel like your sim has gotten boring, despite having a backstory and despite, playing with them, but we'll get to that. But on the example of Animate, so when I was playing Keith, I initially thought, okay, one of his plans is to build a ranch. And so within that plan, we found a really nice abandoned cabin. And now the plan was to fix up this abandoned cabin for the purpose of building that ranch, which he did. So he fixed it up, and that was great. And then he went on a date with Sienna. So Sienna is somebody from Chestnut Ridge, and they hit it off immediately. They hit it off so well that she ended up inviting him to move in. And so the cabin was no longer his home, and so he didn't really know what to do with that anymore. And so he ended up renting it out. So it's now on lease for another couple. And so the initial plan to build a ranch is still there. It's still important for Keith to build a ranch. So that is still a point on his plan. But the way I thought he would go about it has changed, just because based off what has happened in the game. And I'm happy for it, because now they live in this really cool ranch in Chestnut Ridge. There's also a story behind that. They couldn't afford it. It's a ranch I found online on YouTube by SimCubies, and I was like, okay, this is the dream ranch. Because since he had already moved out of the abandoned cabin, I was like, you know what? Sienna's, digs are a bit cozy, a bit too small. I don't feel like we could build a proper ranch here. So I was looking for another lot, and we found that. And then they tried to take out a credit, couldn't afford it. So yeah, but I'll get to that later on how they still managed to live on the lot. The dream is still there to build a ranch, in this case, to make the ranch that they're living on their own. But because I pressed play, I wasn't stuck too long on this idea of, oh, it's going to be this abandoned cabin is going to be the ranch. Like I didn't draw out plans of how the ranch was going to be built on the lot. Like that would have been so much wasted time because it turns out when I pressed play that wasn't really the destiny anyways. That they weren't going to actually build the ranch on that lot because he was going to move in with Sienna, and eventually in this other way better ranch, the cabin just ended up being now a source of extra income, which is great. But the story wouldn't have evolved that way if I hadn't pressed play, if I hadn't let the game throw that wrench into the machine, which I'm happy it did. Yeah, I think that's an argument to press play because it saves you also some creative energy. You don't have to come up with everything. That's also the fun of the game is that it's like a bit of a, give and take. You come up with something, you play it out, and then the game throws you something back, throws you a little bit more back depending on the game you're playing. So The Sims 2 and Sims 3 definitely threw you more back than The Sims 4. But at the same time, with The Sims 4, you can be more flexible. Like you can really play out, I feel, more. You can play more pretend because it's more of an open sandbox and you can really play any sort of storyline. And that's really fun too. But the game still throws you something back, but it can only throw you something back if you press play. And so my task here to help you actually press play and give you like a clear goal, commit to a full sim year. It can be short, like season 1, like the 7-day season. That's what, 28 days? You can do 28 days. And I just say that because I feel like we give up on our save files way too quickly. Like before we've even played, we've already decided that, nah, let's trash it. Give it some time. Give your sim a chance to live and for you to actually fall in love with your sim. And that's why I'm proposing to actually commit to playing a year's worth in game and not just like an hour session. So yeah, that's the first step. Aim to play your save file for at least 1 full sim year. Keep track of the time gone by so that you can actually celebrate when you've completed it. So when you've actually completed a full sim year, celebrate. Maybe you can treat yourself to a new save file. I don't know. I feel like that's like or you can treat yourself to an hour in CAS or something. I don't know. Or you can treat your sim to something like celebrate somehow. Like maybe you can create a holiday that you celebrate in your game. That's like the Watcher Day or something. And when you reach that day, you've played a year. So if you don't want to keep track manually, but if you do want to keep track of time manually, I actually have a couple of templates that you can use. So for one, there's a Sim Guardian, which I built in Notion. It's like my dream system to keep track of anything and everything about my Sims. Also my sim goals and achievements and stuff like that. It comes with like a calendar system, fully fledged, where you can save events and holidays. It has like a little mini calendar where on the save file record, you can keep track of like the actual day we're having, like for on a daily basis. It's really cool. But it's an investment. So if you want something free, I've also created a free template that you can use to track your save files. So really it's pretty simple. You can track the calendar. So you can track a year's worth of calendar days, and you can also keep notes about your sim sessions and pop screenshots in there if you want. So it's a more simple template than my Sim Guardian, but it's free. It's super easy to use. If you want to check that out, just check the link in the description. I'll have it there. Like I find it's really cool to know, like, to not only finish a year, but at some point know, okay, I've played 3 sim years worth in this save file. Like that's pretty cool. So and the EA app can't do that. So I think, and I don't know if there's any other way in the game to see how many years you've played. You really have to tally that up manually. So yeah, why not do that in a nice and neat and cool handy dandy Notion template? And the next step, the third of the bunch, starts with R, and that stands for record. Now, I go on and on and on about this. If you want to have more fun in your game, if you want to feel less overwhelmed, if you just want to have more of a good time, even after you've played, record your gameplay, like keep track. To record means essentially to set down in writing or some other permanent form for later reference. And so it's basically an evidence of the past. Of the past we've been going on for so long now. The characterized part where we create a backstory for our sim, and then the animate part where we create the present story for our sim moving forward, and which will become history with every new sim day you play. And so we want to keep track of all that. I think it is so valuable to have a way to remember your Sims milestones and their achievements, to have a reference of the memories that you've made in the game. So I personally like to collect Sim profiles. So just, it could be super simple, like their names, obviously, life stage or life stages that they've lived through, some basic relationships that they have, and their traits, of course, their aspiration, and maybe like most important skills, like the ones they've mastered career, stuff like that. You can be super elaborate. Like I have in my Sim Guardian where I keep track of their goals. Like I have a bucket list section where their goals are sorted by life stage. I have a plan section where we have events as well, goals that are related to challenges, maybe any other plans I might have related to their achievements. For example, in my achievements bit in Sim Guardian, I also keep track of projects that they might have, hobbies. So you can keep track of a lot or a little. I definitely think having some sort of system or template helps because it just makes it super easy. You don't have to think ahead of time, okay, what am I going to keep track of today? You're consistent. You always keep track of the same stuff. Whether, you're keeping track of a memory and you want to keep track of maybe the location, the day it happened, like the day it happened in real life and in game. And I could go on and on. Those are kind of things I keep track of. So sim profiles, session summaries are great so that you can just quickly look back on what happened in the last session. Screenshots are great, but not just screenshots, but find a way to caption them to give more context to them. I have experienced it myself. I have screenshots from like 14 years ago and I have no idea, or I mean, I with some digging I found out again, but it took a while. Like, who is this in the photo? I mean, I still have some photos where I still don't know like the names of Sims, and if I would have found a way to organize the screenshots better back in the day, I would have had more context and like names, locations, what was actually happening in those screenshots. So yeah, I think it's helpful not just to take screenshots but to organize them as well. I know it's like, okay, wow, I have like 1,000 plus right now in my folder. It seems overwhelming, but if you get started with it and bit by bit, you can like you can also just ignore the backlog, but moving forward, it's really helpful to keep that organized, just for later reference, for nostalgia's sake, for example. It's also really fun to record in like a paper journal, to scrapbook, for example, to print out those screenshots and to embellish them like with stickers and stuff like that and with your own little doodles. So I actually do that in my sim planner. So here is the sim planner that I have. You can see here, I have here, for example, a week's worth of Keith's life in here. So here you see it. As you can see here, it's like a week's worth of Keith's life. And I thought it was really fun to add, well, let's see, get this in the camera. Let's put it here. So his so screenshots from gameplay and, a little bit of his schedule, but also just a log, a little bit of what happened. I have space for his to-dos, any plans they have, like routines also, and then also space for notes. So it's really fun to also just, like, my favorite by far is to use Notion because it's just so simple and easy. Like it's digital, right? But I think there's definitely something worth having a notebook. It doesn't have to be the Sim Planner either. It can be anything really. So you can get the Sim Planner. You can shop that on Amazon. I created it myself, but you can use any box standard notebook really. And you can just write on the top like which day it was or which season and whatnot, and which household it represents, and then you can just copy, you can just paste the photos right into there. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it's definitely fun to get scrappy-booky with it. And also GoodNotes is great for that as well. So I have a digital sim life planner that I like to use for Ida, and you can also paste photos into that, and you can get a little bit, like you have a little bit more freedom there because it's digital, but it's like a nice hybrid because it's on the tablet, so you still have handwritten notes that you can add, and you can crop photos in really fun ways. You don't need any glue or scissors or anything like that. You don't need to print anything out, so it's a lot easier, but it's like a middle thing because it's still digital, so you don't have that pen and paper feel, but it's still fun. So definitely try scrapbooking as well, I think. So not just straight up logging the information, but doing it in a more creative way. I also find it can be quite fun when you do this to role play a little bit and write from the perspective of your Sims. That helps you also connect with them a little bit more and maybe discover bits about their personality that you didn't know yet, because it's like you didn't think of it from that angle yet. So that could be quite fun as well. So another big reason why I think it's super useful to record your Sims story is it just helps you get back into the game easier when, after a break. Even if your break was just a weekend, sometimes a lot of stuff happened in like a 6-hour binge and you want to be able to recall everything, or yeah, you take a proper break and you don't know anymore what happened, and it's super nice if you have your session notes or the last few memories cataloged and you can just flick through them. It's super useful. And so the next task here is to organize your screenshots. So let's move away from those huge folders, those screenshot folders, where we just have a bunch of screenshots scattered around. So the task for step 3 for recording is to organize your screenshots. So once you get started and get in the flow, then it's really not that hard. So I propose creating a digital photo album for your screenshots in Notion. Again, it's a free note-taking app, so anybody can use it. It's super accessible. I actually created a tutorial on how to create such a digital photo album in Notion, so just check the description below for a tutorial on that. But it's super useful. You can add captions and notes to your screenshots so that you can remember who was in the photo, the locations, the story behind it. So I think it's super useful if you want to still remember that context behind those screenshots. So now we're on to the last step in the CARE method. The E stands for evolve. Evolve means essentially to develop gradually, and that's what we want our stories to do. So I mentioned before we have our characters that we characterize our Sims. We give them backstories, personalities, goals, but maybe after playing that storyline for a while, it gets a bit boring and you're like, I'm kind of stuck now. And so here's where you can, like, if you've already given your Sim a backstory, and you're kind of stuck because you're like, I've kind of played it all out now, you can evolve. You can transform their story. So instead of starting from scratch with a new fresh save file to bring back that novelty, why not bring novelty into the save file in the sim you're playing already? So here the point is to break old patterns, playing the same storyline over and over again. To evolve your sim story, you can introduce new sims, new locations, so you can have them move, for example, to a new world. You can add new stakes in the sense of, you can have a villain move to town and they're somehow threatening your Sim's livelihood or something that's important to them. They have something to lose. Maybe Don Lothario moves next door and threatens to steal their wife. I don't know. You can also integrate elements from a challenge. So there's a lot of challenges in the Sims community that give a little bit of direction to your gameplay, but it can maybe be a bit overwhelming and also very time consuming to commit fully to a challenge entirely. But why not just take a bit of a challenge, like a piece of it that you find interesting, and use that to change your story a little bit and so give your sim a little bit of a new direction. Again, the longer you stick with a save file, the richer its history. So I feel like the more meaningful your gameplay will be. And so that's why I feel like it's important not to give up on your save file just because, it feels a little bit boring or you feel stuck. There are ways to reinvigorate it, right? To freshen it up without starting from scratch. And honestly, I feel like starting from scratch is sometimes more exhausting than taking a little bit of time to add that novelty to what you've already, created, what you're already playing. And again, we were recording our memories and whatnot. So you can use that. You can use that information about your Sim's history to actually build upon it and inspire the next part. So yeah, like for example, with Don Lothario, we had, a womanizer who turned redemption arc, turned good. So that's how his story could maybe potentially evolve. And so what history have you built already with your sim? So it could just be their backstory if you haven't really played much yet. But if we've, gone through step A, animate, so you've played the game for a full sim year, what history has been made? What can you use from that to inspire the next step? How can you change things up? Maybe, they encountered a certain sim throughout that time that maybe you didn't think of much at the time, but now you're like, okay, let's revisit the relationship panel. Just take the time, the opportunity to take bits and pieces from their history and to turn that into something that could, transition the story and refresh it, give it novelty again and make it exciting again. So it's all about also being flexible and rolling with what the game gives you. So for example, here is a list or could be the list that Keith had when I first pressed play. So, step A, animate. And so he wanted to renovate the abandoned cabin and he wanted to expand the cabin to a ranch, right? Those were his goals. So he achieved that. He ended up renovating the abandoned cabin. It looked great. But then he moved in with Sienna after they had such great dates, right? So scratch expanding the cabin to a ranch, that's now being leased out to another couple because he now lives with Sienna. And so now we have a couple of new goals. So Sienna's now in our household. So what's important to her? And so she loves animals. And I had already eyed that dream ranch already beforehand. So I thought it would be really nice to turn that into an animal welfare center. And so that was added to my list of goals for the household in its entirety. And we wanted to also buy that dream ranch. We thought that space would be perfect and lovely for both Keith's wishes and hers. So for the animal center and, of course, for the ranch for Keith. And so those were two new items. Buying the Dream Ranch didn't really work out though. They tried to take out a credit and they were denied because, I mean, both of them, I think both of them, no, Keith had a job as a landscaper, like that, where he worked twice a week, and Sienna had just not quit her job. So yeah, getting a credit was not in their cards at the time being. So instead, I decided that the Landgrabs could own that lot and rent out the property to Keith and Sienna. So that was a way for them to still live on the property. And this is actually an idea I got from a subscriber, so thank you a lot for that. It let me be able to move in with them onto that property a lot sooner than would have been possible otherwise. And so yeah, renting the Dream Ranch worked out. Currently, last but not least, we have the new goal to get cushy with Nancy, because we don't own the property. So we can't really go full on animal welfare center yet with it. You can't just like rent out a property and build a whole new business on it, right? So we still also aren't close to owning it. It's like 200K, even more to own it outright. And the Landgrabs would have to also sell it to us. So for the time being, Sienna's trying to get close with Nancy so that she can have a little influence on her and convince her to let her build an animal welfare center on the property. And so that's where I am currently with the story, and that's how the story evolved thanks to me playing the game, and that's how goals evolved and a lot of other things as well, because I also went back to the drawing board and brainstormed a little bit more here and there and played around with what the game was giving me. I said, I have a lot of fun thinking up story and, you know, with what the game gives me, but also on my own. I also played a lot with Enneagram personality types that inspired a lot of what I am playing right now as well. But yeah, so that is kind of how your story can evolve based on the game and what you do with it. And so my task that I give you here for the last step for Evolve is to reinvent your sim. So give your sim a new lease on life. So revisit a sim that you haven't played for a long time. So maybe you have an old save file that's collecting dust. What could you do there? What could you rediscover? How could you change the trajectory of that sim story? So maybe they can move to a new world, they can change a job, maybe you can even like roll their traits new again. Like I think with the midlife crisis that actually happens, I think your sim gets a couple new traits. So why not trigger a midlife crisis on your own? You are the watcher, you know, give them a makeover, and yeah, basically play with this new transition. So that comes back to step 2, animate. So don't take too long on step E, evolve, or step C, characterize, right? This isn't the point where we want to end up procrastinating and staying away from live mode. These are the steps that help you feel excited again for your storyline so that when you jump back into the game, it just flows. So those are the 4 steps. The care method. So C, characterize, A, animate, R, record, and E, evolve. So I hope that helps you get unstuck whenever you are feeling stuck. Just go back to any of those points, like go through the letters and see what you could do, whether it's giving your sim more personality or, you know, goals that feel more meaningful to them or to you, whether that's actually pressing play and playing a bit of improv, a bit of give and take with the game, recording your gameplay, which can also make you feel also a lot more connected to your sim, you know, looking back maybe through what has happened in the past and building upon it, so evolving the story. So I hope that helps you feel excited to play again. So above me or around me are going to be videos that I think you'd also be interested in, so definitely check those out. And also, if you enjoyed this chat, please make sure to subscribe, whether you're listening or you're watching, wherever you're consuming this content. It really helps me and my channel and to reach more like you, and also select that bell bit or whatever so that you're notified also when I drop something new. Till then, stay sentimental.